grip of poverty. Some years ago, I was an expert witness for a funding equity case in the state of South Carolina, and I used the phrase, because I told you earlier about how language matters, and that's why I don't say at risk. It's not a phrase I would use lightly. I use the phrase school dependent versus school independent. And I describe a school independent child much like that adolescent that's living in my household, who really didn't need to go to school because she lives with two college-educated parents who have access to so much information, who have taken her around the world. In fact, there are times when I took her out of school because where I was taking her was going to be more educational than sitting in school. I've taken her to Tokyo and said, you know, for 2 weeks you're going to be in this middle school class in Tokyo, which was to me a more educational experience. She's school independent. She's going to get it. But there are kids who sat side by side with her who did not have these resources, whose parents themselves had not done well in school, who were just as smart, if not smarter, than my daughter, who are what I call school dependent. In other words, if they are to get what it is the society has to offer, school has to provide it. So it's not about the kids being at risk or not at risk, we're all at risk for something. But it is about the way in which school functions in their lives. And for many rich folks, it's really about credentials. You just got to get the right paper so you can get moving where you need to go. One of the reasons that we know that the core value education is actually found in the historical record. During the civil rights era, education was indeed the primary battleground. It was not about sitting on the front or the back of a bus. It was about getting a bus to get to school. It was seen as more important than jobs, than housing, and other social inequalities. Indeed, people have literally died for an education. Yet we keep hearing that certain families don't value it. A big part of my work is actually observing schools and teaching in what we think of as naturalistic settings. I just kind of, it's a big way of saying I go in and hang out, right? Just get to sit in and watch what people do. And what I find fascinating is not what people do, but the meaning that is attached to what they do. So let me give you an example. When my daughter was an elementary student, she was one of these kids who was extremely difficult to wake up in the morning. Still is. Can't get that girl out of bed. Every day was an adventure in determining how I was going to get her up and out of school and not stop for speeding. I mean, one of my last strategies was to actually dress her while she was still in the bed. Get up, you know, so she'd be laying there. Then she'd wake up and go, woo, woo! You know, she knows she ain't going to bed like that, right? So it was always this big challenge. So she would end up running into her classroom with papers flying out of her unzipped backpack, half-eaten muffin or bagel or piece of toast in her hand. And even though she was often arriving at school just before the bell and many times just after it, because of who I am in the Madison community, no one would dare describe our family as not caring about education. However, on the other side of town where I was conducting research, in a neighborhood of more modest and low-income apartment complexes, more modest homes and low-income apartment complexes, I often saw a mother drive her daughter to school, or all of her children, and drop them off, just as I had done with my daughter. Her vehicle was older. Her kids probably were dressed a lot, not as expensive as perhaps my daughter. But the kids' backpacks also had papers flying out, and they too had some portion of the day's breakfast in their hand, muffin, bagel, piece of toast. The difference was when those children got inside of the school, I heard whispers of, Those people just don't care about education. They care to get these children here in school on time. That mother and I were engaged in the very same behavior. We struggled to get our children to school on time. And yet the meaning placed on our actions was very different. Okay, so here's the one that's going to make everybody mad. Children, they're coming from a culture of poverty. I think that this last myth bothers me most of all. It bothers me on the intellectual level because my training is in anthropology. And I'm very proprietary about that term, that concept, culture. The term culture is reserved for some pretty specific and tacit understandings. Culture is what people make. It represents their worldviews, their symbol systems, their art, their language, their very being. I mean, culture is one of those things just really, really, I mean, we toss it around all the time, but it is so deeply ingrained in who we are. So let me give you an example. How many right-handed people in the room? Okay. So I'm going to take just the right-handed people out to dinner. Left-handed people, I'll fix you up later. Just the right-handed folks and I are going out to dinner. We're going to go, we're going to go up to Indianapolis. We're going to go to, where's it, St. Elmo? Where's the place you got to get? You got to go if you go to Indianapolis, right? You get a big hunking piece of red meat. So we're going to order that red meat. The vegetarians are going to get you a big old hunking piece of tofu. And when the waiter brings it, it's going to bring it to you on the table. You're going to see that your fork is on the left hand, right? Left side as you face it. And your knife and spoon on the right hand. Everybody with me? Have I said anything that's weird? You all recognize this, right? So the very first thing you're going to do is take that fork and stab that piece of meat on that tofu with your left hand. Then you're going to pick up the knife in your right hand. And then you're going to slice across that piece of meat. Stop. What's the next move? You're going to switch hands. Why? Why? You got the thing, you done cornered it, you know. You stopped it, you stabbed it, you cut it. The math educator will tell you the shortest distance between two lines, right here. But no, you about to do the hand job. And you will do it the entire night. Why do we do that? It is a part of American culture. A lot of times people say, well, that was the way I was taught, or that's the right way. No, it's about American culture, because if you go over to France and be doing all that hand jobs, people are going to look at you like, what's wrong with you? Because Europeans eat like this, right? We made that switch to kind of delineate ourselves from the old country. Remember that most whites have entered this country in the Great Migration, 1890, 1920s, right? And so they don't want to be seen as, I'm from that old place. So this thing emerged. That's how tacit our culture is. It's in every single thing we do and say. So to argue somebody said, oh, they're from a culture of poverty, is really incorrect. It bothers me on a visceral level because poverty is not a culture. Poverty is a condition produced by the economic, social, and political arrangements of a society. Poverty is linked to the values of a society. So when we think it's acceptable for people to work and not make a living wage, we contribute to the creation of poverty. When we demand low prices for goods and services, cheap and plentiful food, clothing, clerical and domestic services, we participate in the creation of poverty. In 1962, when Michael Harris